Chapter 4 of Some Problems of Philosophy, a Beginning of an Introduction to Philosophy, by William James. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Percept and Concept. The Import of Concepts. The problem convenient to take up next in order will be that of the difference between thoughts and things. Things are known to us by our senses, and are called presentations by some authors, to distinguish them from the ideas or representations which we may have when our senses are closed. I myself have grown accustomed to the words percept and concept, in treating of the contrast. But concepts flow out of percepts and into them again. They are so interlaced, and our life rests on them so interchangeably and undiscriminatingly, that it is often difficult to impart quickly to beginners a clear notion of the difference meant. Sensation and thought in man are mingled, but they vary independently. In our quadrupedal relatives, thought proper is at a minimum, but we have no reason to suppose that their immediate life of feeling is either less or more copious than ours. Feeling must have been originally self-sufficing, and thought appears as a superadded function, adapting us to a wider environment than that of which brutes take account. Some parts of the stream of feeling must be more intense, emphatic, and exciting than others in animals as well as in ourselves. But whereas lower animals simply react upon these more salient sensations by appropriate movements, higher animals remember them, and men react on them intellectually by using nouns, adjectives, and verbs to identify them when they meet them elsewhere. The great difference between percepts and concepts is that percepts are continuous and concepts are discrete. Footnote: in what follows I shall freely use synonyms for these two terms. Idea, thought, and intellection are synonymous with concept. Instead of percept, I shall often speak of sensation, feeling, intuition, and sometimes of sensible experience, or of the immediate flow of conscious life. Since Hegel's time, what is simply perceived has been called the immediate, while the mediated is synonymous with what is conceived. End footnote. Not discrete in their being, for conception as an act is part of the flux of feeling, but discrete from each other in their several meanings. Each concept means just what it singly means, and nothing else. And if the conceiver does not know whether he means this or means that, it shows that his concept is imperfectly formed. The perceptual flux as such, on the contrary, means nothing, and is but what it immediately is. No matter how small a tract of it be taken, it is always a much at once, and contains innumerable aspects and characters, which conception can pick out, isolate, and thereafter always intend. It shows duration, intensity, complexity or simplicity, interestingness, excitingness, pleasantness, or their opposites. Data from all our senses enter into it, merged in a general extensiveness of which each occupies a big or little share. Yet all these parts leave its unity unbroken. Its boundaries are no more distinct than those of the field of vision. Boundaries are things that intervene. But here nothing intervenes save parts of the perceptual flux itself, and these are overflowed by what they separate, so that whatever we distinguish and isolate conceptually is found perceptually to telescope and compenetrate and diffuse into its neighbors. The cuts we make are purely ideal. If my reader can succeed in abstracting from all conceptual interpretation, and lapse back into his immediate sensible life at this very moment, he will find it to be what someone has called a big blooming buzzing confusion, as free from contradiction in its much at onceness as it is all alive and evidently there. Out of this aboriginal sensible muchness, attention carves out objects, which conception then names and identifies forever. In the sky, constellations; on the earth, beach, sea, cliff, bushes, grass. Out of time we cut days and nights, summers and winters. We say what each part of the sensible continuum is, and all these abstracted whats are concepts. The intellectual life of man consists almost wholly in his substitution of a conceptual order for the perceptual order in which his experience originally comes. But before tracing the consequences of the substitution, I must say something about the conceptual order itself. Trains of concepts unmixed with percepts grow frequently in the adult mind, and parts of these conceptual trains arrest our attention just as parts of the perceptual flow did, giving rise to concepts of a higher order of abstractness. So subtle is the discernment of man, and so great the power of some men to single out the most fugitive elements of what passes before them, that these new formations have no limit. Aspect within aspect, quality after quality, relation upon relation, absences and negations as well as present features, end by being noted and their names added to the store of nouns, verbs, adjectives, conjunctions, and prepositions by which the human mind interprets life. Every new book verbalizes some new concept, which becomes important in proportion to the use that can be made of it. Different universes of thought thus arise, with specific sorts of relation among their ingredients. The world of common sense things, the world of material tasks to be done, the mathematical world of pure forms, the world of ethical propositions, the worlds of logic, of music, etc., all abstracted and generalized from long forgotten perceptual instances, from which they have as it were flowered out, return and merge themselves again in the particulars of our present and future perception. By those whats we perceive all our thises. Percepts and concepts interpenetrate and melt together, impregnate and fertilize each other. Neither, taken alone, knows reality in its completeness. We need them both, as we need both our legs to walk with. From Aristotle downwards, philosophers have frankly admitted the indispensability, for complete knowledge of fact, of both the sensational and the intellectual contribution. For complete knowledge of fact, I say, but facts are particulars and connect themselves with practical necessities and the arts. And Greek philosophers soon formed the notion that a knowledge of so called universals, consisting of concepts of abstract forms, qualities, numbers, and relations, was the only knowledge worthy of the truly philosophic mind. Particular facts decay and our perceptions of them vary. A concept never varies, and between such unvarying terms the relations must be constant and express eternal verities. Hence there arose a tendency, which has lasted all through philosophy, to contrast the knowledge of universals and intelligibles, as godlike, dignified, and honorable to the knower, with that of particulars and sensibles as something relatively base, which more allies us with the beasts. Footnote: Plato, in numerous places, but chiefly in books 6 and 7 of the Republic, contrasts perceptual knowledge as opinion with real knowledge to the latter's glory. Plato, writes Professor Santayana, thought that all the truth and meaning of earthly things was the reference they contained to a heavenly original. This heavenly original we remember to recognize even among the distortions, disappearances, and multiplications of its ephemeral copies. The impressions themselves have no permanence, no intelligible essence, but are always either arising or ceasing to be. There must be, he tells us, an eternal and clearly definable object, of which the visible appearances to us are the multiform semblances. Now by one trait, now by another, the phantom before us reminds us of that half forgotten celestial reality, and makes us utter its name. We and the whole universe exist only in the attempt to return to our perfection, to lose ourselves again in God. That ineffable good is our natural possession, and all we honor in this life is but a partial recovery of our birthright. Every delightful thing is like a rift in the clouds, through which we catch a glimpse of our native heaven. And if that heaven seems so far away, and the idea of it so dim and unreal, it is because we are so far from perfect, so immersed in what is alien and destructive to the soul. This is the interpretation of Plato which has been current since Aristotle. It should be said that its profundity has been challenged by Professor A. J. Stewart. Plato's Doctrine of Ideas, Oxford, 1909. Aristotle found great fault with Plato's treatment of ideas as heavenly originals, but he agreed with him fully as to the superior excellence of the conceptual or theoretic life. In chapters 7 and 8 of Book 10 of the Nicomachean Ethics he extols contemplation of universal relations as alone yielding pure happiness. The life of God in all its exceeding blessedness will consist in the exercise of philosophic thought, and all of human activities that will be the happiest which is most akin to the divine. For rationalistic writers conceptual knowledge was not only the more noble knowledge, but it originated independently of all perceptual particulars. Such concepts as God, perfection, eternity, infinity, immutability, identity, absolute beauty, truth, justice, necessity, freedom, duty, worth, etc., and the part they play in our mind, are, it was supposed, impossible to explain as results of practical experience. The empiricist view, and probably the true view, is that they do result from practical experience. But a more important question than that as to the origin of our concepts is that as to their functional use and value. Is that tied down to perceptual experience, or out of all relation to it? Is conceptual knowledge self-sufficing, and a revelation all by itself, quite apart from its uses in helping to a better understanding of the world of sense? Rationalists say yes. For, as we shall see in later places, the various conceptual universes referred to on page 52 can be considered in complete abstraction from perceptual reality. And when they are so considered, all sorts of fixed relations can be discovered among their parts. From these the a priori sciences of logic, mathematics, ethics, and aesthetics, so far as the last two can be called sciences at all, result. Conceptual knowledge must thus be called a self-sufficing revelation, and by rationalistic writers it has always been treated as admitting us to a diviner world, the world of universal rather than of perishing facts, of essential qualities, immutable relations, eternal principles of truth and right. Emerson writes, Generalization is always a new influx of divinity into the mind. Hence the thrill that attends it. And a disciple of Hegel, after exalting the knowledge of the general, unchangeable, and alone valuable, above that of the particular, sensible, and transient, adds that, if you reproach philosophy with being unable to make a single grass blade grow, or even to know how it does grow, the reply is that, since such a particular how stands not above but below knowledge, strictly so called, such an ignorance argues no defect. To this ultra-rationalistic opinion the empiricist contention that the significance of concepts consists always in their relation to perceptual particulars has been opposed. Made of percepts, or distilled from parts of percepts, their essential office, it has been said, is to coalesce with percepts again, bringing the mind back into the perceptual world with a better command of the situation there. Certainly wherever we can do this with our concepts, we do more with them than when we leave them flocking with their abstract and motionless companions. It is possible, therefore, to join the rationalists in allowing conceptual knowledge to be self-sufficing, while at the same time one joins the empiricists by maintaining that the full value of such knowledge is got only by combining it with perceptual reality again. This mediating attitude is that which this book must adopt. But to understand the nature of concepts better, we must now go on to distinguish their function from their content. The concept man, to take an example, is three things. 1. The word itself. 2. A vague picture of the human form which has its own value in the way of beauty or not. And 3. An instrument for symbolizing certain objects from which we may expect human treatment when occasion arrives. Similarly of triangle, cosine. They have their substantive value both as words and as images suggested, but they also have a functional value whenever they lead us elsewhere in discourse. There are concepts, however, the image part of which is so faint that their whole value seems to be functional. God, cause, number, substance, soul, for example, suggest no definite picture, and their significance seems to consist entirely in their tendency, in the further turn which they may give to our action or our thought. We cannot rest in the contemplation of their form, as we can in that of a circle or a man. We must pass beyond. Now, however beautiful or otherwise worthy of stationary contemplation the substantive part of a concept may be, the more important part of its significance may naturally be held to be the consequences to which it leads. These may lie either in the way of making us think, or in the way of making us act. Whoever has a clear idea of these knows effectively what the concept practically signifies, whether its substantive content be interesting in its own right or not. This consideration has led to a method of interpreting concepts to which I shall give the name of the pragmatic rule. The pragmatic rule is that the meaning of a concept may always be found, if not in some sensible particular which it directly designates, then in some particular difference in the course of human experience which its being true will make. Test every concept by the question, what sensible difference to anybody will its truth make? And you are in the best possible position for understanding what it means and for discussing its importance. If questioning whether a certain concept be true or false, you can think of absolutely nothing that would practically differ in the two cases, you may assume that the alternative is meaningless and that your concept is no distinct idea. If two concepts lead you to infer the same particular consequences, then you may assume that they embody the same meaning under different names. This rule applies to concepts of every order of complexity, from simple terms to propositions uniting many terms. So many disputes in philosophy hinge upon ill-defined words and ideas, each side claiming its own word or idea to be true. That any accepted method of making meanings clear must be of great utility. No method can be handier of application than our pragmatic rule. If you claim that any idea is true, assign at the same time some difference that its being true will make in some possible person's history, and we shall know not only just what you are really claiming, but also how important an issue it is, and how to go to work to verify the claim. In obeying this rule, we neglect the substantive content of the concept, and follow its function only. This neglect might seem at first sight to need excuse, for the content often has a value of its own, which might conceivably add luster to reality, if it existed, apart from any modification wrought by it in the other parts of reality. Thus it is often supposed that idealism is a theory precious in itself, even though no definite change in the details of our experience can be deduced from it. Later discussion will show that this is a superficial view, and that particular consequences are the only criterion of a concept's meaning and the only test of its truth. Instances are hardly called for, they are so obvious. That A and B are equal, for example, means either that you will find no difference when you pass from one to the other, or that in substituting one for the other in certain operations, you will get the same result both times. Substance means that a definite group of sensations will recur. Incommensurable means that you are always confronted with a remainder. Infinite means either that, or that you can count as many units in a part as you can in the whole. More and less mean certain sensations, varying according to the matter. Freedom means no feeling of sensible restraint. Necessity means that your way is blocked in all directions save one. God means that you can dismiss certain kinds of fear. Cause, that you may expect certain sequences, etc., etc. We shall find plenty of examples in the rest of this book. So I go back now to the more general question of whether the whole import of the world of concepts lies in its relation to perceptual experience, or whether it be also an independent revelation of reality. Great ambiguity is possible in answering this question, so we must mind our P's and Q's. The first thing to notice is that in the earliest stages of human intelligence, so far as we can guess at them, thought proper must have had an exclusively practical use. Men classed their sensations, substituting concepts for them, in order to work them for what they were worth, and to prepare for what might lie ahead. Class names suggest consequences that have attached themselves on other occasions to other members of the class, consequences which the present percept will also probably or certainly show. The present percept in its immediacy may thus often sink to the status of a bare sign of the consequences which the substituted concept suggests. The substitution of concepts and their connections, of a whole conceptual order, in short, for the immediate perceptual flow, thus widens enormously our mental panorama. Had we no concepts, we should live simply getting each successive moment of experience, as the sensile sea anemone on its rock receives whatever nourishment the wash of the waves may bring. With concepts we must go in quest of the absent, meet the remote, actively turn this way or that, bend our experience and make it tell us whither it is bound. We change its order, run it backwards, bring far bits together and separate near bits, jump about over its surface instead of plowing through its continuity, string its items on as many ideal diagrams as our mind can frame. All these are ways of handling the perceptual flux, and meeting distant parts of it. And as far as this primary function of conception goes, we can only conclude it to be what I began by calling it, a faculty superadded to our barely perceptual consciousness, for its use in practically adapting us to a larger environment than that of which brutes take account. Footnote: Herbert Spencer in his Psychology, parts 3 and 4, has at great length tried to show that such adaptation is the sole meaning of our intellect. End footnote. We harness perceptual reality in our concepts in order to drive it better to our ends. Does our conceptual translation of the perceptual flux enable us to understand the latter better? What do we mean by making us understand? Applying our pragmatic rule to the interpretation of the world, we see that the better we understand anything, the more we are able to tell about it. Judged by this test, concepts do make us understand our percepts better. Knowing what these are, we can tell all sorts of farther truths about them, based on the relation of those whats to other whats. The whole system of relations, spatial, temporal, and logical, of our fact gets plotted out. An ancient philosophical opinion inherited from Aristotle is that we do not understand a thing until we know it by its causes. When the maidservant says that the cat broke the teacup, she would have us conceive the fracture in a causally explanatory way. No otherwise when Clerk Maxwell asks us to conceive of gas electricity as due to molecular bombardment. An imaginary agent out of sight becomes in each case a part of the cosmic context in which we now place the percept to be explained. And the explanation is valid insofar as the new causal that is itself conceived in a context that makes its existence probable, and with a nature agreeable to the effects it is imagined to produce. All our scientific explanations would seek to conform to this simple type of the necessary cat. The conceived order of nature, built round the perceived order and explaining it theoretically, as we say, is only a system of hypothetically imagined thats, the whats of which harmoniously connect themselves with the what of any that which we immediately perceive. The system is essentially a topographic system, a system of the distribution of things. It tells us what's what, and where's where. In so far forth it merely prolongs that opening up of the perspective of practical consequences which we found to be the primordial utility of the conceiving faculty. It adapts us to an immense environment. Working by the causes of things we gain advantages which we never should have compassed had we worked by the things alone. But in order to reach such results, the concepts in the explanatory system must, I said, harmoniously connect. What does that mean? Is this also only a practical advantage, or is it something more? It seems something more, for it points to the fact that when concepts of various sorts are once abstracted or constructed, new relations are then found between them, connecting them in peculiarly intimate, rational, and unchangeable ways. In another book I've tried to show that these rational relations are all products of our faculty of comparison, and of our sense of more. The sciences which exhibit these relations are the so-called a priori sciences of mathematics and logic. But these sciences express relations of comparison and identification exclusively. Geometry and algebra, for example, first define certain conceptual objects. and then establish equations between them, substituting equals for equals. Logic has been defined as the substitution of similars, and in general one may say that the perception of likeness and unlikeness generates the whole of rational or necessary truth. Nothing happens in the worlds of logic, mathematics, or moral and aesthetic preference. The static nature of the relations in these worlds is what gives to the propositions that express them their eternal character. The binomial theorem, e.g., expresses the value of any power of any sum of two terms, to the end of time. These vast unmoving systems of universal terms form the new worlds of thought of which I spoke on page 56. The terms are elements, or are framed of elements, abstracted from the perceptual flux. But in their abstract shape we note relations between them, and again between these relations, which enable us to set up various schemes of fixed serial orders, or of more and more. The terms are indeed man made, but the order, being established solely by comparison, is fixed by the nature of the terms on the one hand, and by our power of perceiving relations on the other. Thus two abstract twos are always the same as an abstract four. What contains the container contains the contained, of whatever material either be made. Equals added to equals always give equal results, in the world in which abstract equality is the only property the terms are supposed to possess. The more than the more is more than the less, no matter in what direction of moreness we advance. If you dot off a term in one series every time you dot off one in another, the two series will either never end or will come to an end together, or one will be exhausted first, etc., etc. The results being those skeletons of rational or necessary truth, in which our logic and mathematics books, sometimes our philosophy books, arrange their universal terms. The rationalization of any mass of perceptual fact consists in assimilating its concrete terms, one by one, to so many terms of the conceptual series, and then in assuming that the relations intuitively found among the latter are what connect the former too. Thus we rationalize gas pressure by identifying it with the blows of hypothetic molecules. Then we see that the more closely the molecules are crowded, the more frequent the blows upon the containing walls will become. Then we discern the exact proportionality of the crowding with the number of blows, so that finally Marriott's empirical law gets rationally explained. All our transformations of the sense order into a more rational equivalent are similar to this one. We interrogate the beautiful apparition, as Emerson calls it, which our senses ceaselessly raise upon our path, and the items there refer us to their interpretants in the shape of ideal constructions in some static arrangement which our mind has already made out of its concepts alone. The interpretants are then substituted for the sensations, which thus get rationally conceived. To explain means to coordinate, one by one, the thises of the perceptual flow with the whats of the ideal manifold, whichever it be. We may well call this a theoretic conquest over the order in which nature originally comes. The conceptual order into which we translate our experience seems not only a means of practical adaptation, but the revelation of a deeper level of reality in things. Being more constant, it is truer, less illusory than the perceptual order, and ought to command our attention more. There is still another reason why conception appears such an exalted function. Concepts not only guide us over the map of life, but we revalue life by their use. Concepts not only guide us over the map of life, but we revalue life by their use. Their relation to percepts is like that of sight to touch. Sight indeed helps us, by preparing us for contacts while they are yet far off. But it endows us in addition with a new world of optical splendor, interesting enough all by itself to occupy a busy life. Just so do concepts bring their proper splendor. The mere possession of such vast and simple pictures is an inspiring good. They arouse new feelings of sublimity, power, and admiration, new interests and motivations. Ideality often clings to things only when they are taken thus abstractly. Causes, as anti slavery, democracy, etc., dwindle when realized in their sordid particulars. Abstractions will touch us when we are callous to the concrete instances in which they lie embodied. Loyal in our measure to particular ideals, we soon set up abstract loyalty as something of a superior order, to be infinitely loyal to, and truth at large becomes a momentous issue, compared with which truths in detail are poor scraps, mere crumbling successes. J. Royce, The Philosophy of Loyalty, 1908, particularly Lecture 7, Section 5. Emerson writes: Each man sees over his own experience a certain stain of error, whilst that of other men looks fair and ideal. Let any man go back to those delicious relations which make the beauty of his life, which have given him sincerest instruction and nourishment, he will shrink and moan, Alas, I know not why, but infinite compunctions embitter in mature life the remembrances of budding joy, and cover every beloved name. Everything is beautiful seen from the point of view of the intellect, or as truth, but all is sour if seen as experience. Details are melancholy, the plan is seemly and noble. In the actual world, the painful kingdom of time and place, dwell care and canker and fear. With thought, with the ideal, is immortal hilarity, the rose of joy. Round it all the muses sing, but grief clings to names and persons and the partial interests of today and yesterday. Essays on Love. So strongly do objects that come as universal and eternal arouse our sensibilities, so greatly do life s values deepen when we translate percepts into ideas. The translation appears as far more than the original s equivalent. Concepts thus play three distinct parts in human life. 1. They steer us practically every day, and provide an immense map of relations among the elements of things, which, though not now, yet on some possible future occasion, may help to steer us practically. 2. They bring new values into our perceptual life. They reanimate our wills and make our action turn upon new points of emphasis. 3. The map which the mind frames out of them is an object which possesses, when once it has been framed, an independent existence. It suffices all by itself for purposes of study. The eternal truths it contains would have to be acknowledged even were the world of sense annihilated. We thus see clearly what is gained and what is lost when percepts are translated into concepts. Perception is solely of the here and now. Conception is of the like and unlike, of the future, of the past, and of the far away. But this map of what surrounds the present, like all maps, is only a surface. Its features are but abstract signs and symbols of things that in themselves are concrete bits of sensible experience. We have but to weigh extent against content, thickness against spread, and we see that for some purposes the one, for other purposes the other, has the higher value. Who can decide offhand which is absolutely better, to live or to understand life? We must do both alternately, and a man can no more limit himself to either than a pair of scissors can cut with a single one of its blades. End of chapter 4.